On this episode of Butt Crack Cycles, we are going to try and resurrect a sleeping Shovelhead. This bike has been sitting for close to a decade. A customer of mine just bought two 70s cone shovels, and this is one of them. There's the rooster. This is a bike that he doesn't want to keep. He bought it with the intent to get me to fix it up, and then he's going to turn around and flip it and sell it, and he's going to keep his other bike. So I'll show you both of those bikes on this episode. And yeah, this is a bike that in its current state I'm not really too crazy about. He's honestly not too crazy about, but I think it has good bones and some good potential. So we're going to spend some time trying to get it to run. If we don't get it to run on this episode, then there'll be probably a part 2. So y'all stay tuned, stick around, see what happens. All right, so here is the bike in question. Like I said, this is a 73 engine. It is sitting in an aftermarket hardtail frame, though. If you look a little bit closely there, you know, right here, there's no swing arm. That's a hardtail frame. And a customer of mine just bought this bike. He went all the way to North Georgia to buy it. He bought this bike, and he also bought this, which is a 1970 FLH. The resurrection of this motorcycle, the FLH, will be a separate episode. But today we're just worried about this one here, this black and blue one. He's trying to sell this one, so I'm going to get on this one first so he can get some of his money back that he spent on the pair of bikes. But as you can see, we've got, you know, your standard cone head shovel engine in here. We have the rooster who's being very loud today, and the ducks are kind of loud today too, so I apologize. 4-speed kicker transmission. This bike is also electric start. You can see our starter hanging out there. It's all the way complete. This looks like kind of a 90s build to me based off of these tanks. If we get kind of up close on that paint job, like that's a really 90s kind of style paint job to me. I'll be honest, the tanks are really like my least favorite part of this bike. These are huge. It probably doesn't come through well on camera. There's my hand, like, for some scale. These tanks are absolutely massive. I bet they're 2 feet wide, and they're stretched. Not my style. The guy who bought this bike isn't really crazy about them either. And then, so you've got these big tanks with the really low seat, kind of really far back, and then the forward control is really far forward, and then the T-bars, drag bars, I guess more like a drag bar deal, so they're basically straight with no pullback on them. I sat on this bike yesterday. It is not comfortable for a short guy like me. But anyways, we've got some variety of an S&S. I hadn't pulled the air cleaner off to see if it's a Super E or a G or a B or what. But we're going to start with, under the seat, we have no battery, but we are gonna, hey, we've got oil, and it actually looks fairly clean. So it's pretty hot today, but it's not like god awful yet. I've got the air conditioner running in the building. I might end up pushing this bike inside, honestly, because all my tools and stuff are in there. But I think for right now, I'm gonna push it backwards a couple of feet, and we might just work on this where it sits for just a few minutes before I retreat to the air conditioning. So let me grab the tripod, let me grab some tools and some gas and a battery, and yeah, let's get started. I'm actually going to start with just taking a look down inside of these tanks and seeing just how bad it is. You can smell the old gas. That actually doesn't look terrible. There's definitely some crap in there. But they're not rusted. It looks like someone's coated the inside of these tanks, and the coating's held up. There's, you know, some debris and such in there. But that doesn't look so bad. Next up, before we get too far, it's in neutral. I just want to see, you know, can I actually even turn the engine and everything inside the primary over just with the kicker. That is, if this thing doesn't try and roll away on me first. Jeez. About to flip this thing over. Let me get a little weight on it. Okay. Yeah, it feels like it's got pretty good compression. I don't have the right size battery for this battery box behind this oil tank. It looks like it probably takes like an FXE, like a kickstart only battery, or maybe like an XLCH size battery. But I do have a full size electric start Shovelhead battery. This is brand new, good battery. We're just gonna put it on the ground and hook some jumper cables to it. So we've got, switch seems to work. There's another switch down here off on. I'm guessing that's ignition. And there's a momentary button right up here. I'm gonna guess that's our starter. Let's just bump it. Yep. All right, starter seems like it's trying to hang. So I've got this little bottle of gas just propped up here on the handlebars. I'll throw a zip tie or something around it. And it's run down to the carburetor. This is a Super E. I see that now that I've gotten the air cleaner off. And I think I'm actually gonna fool around with this and just see, will the carburetor actually flow any gas. I imagine we're gonna have to take this off and rebuild it, but I would really like to ride this into the building versus push it. Flowing down into the carburetor. So we can get a little bit of gas from the accelerator pump, but it's extremely weak. That's not really enough to prime this thing. I might try and kick this over. I doubt that this is going to work. I'm sure this needed a full carburetor rebuild, and obviously we have some starter work to do. And it's usually easier to get a bike started that's been sitting for a long time off of electric starter than it is kickstart. But I'm going to try just a little bit of booger sugar and just try it. We'll see if we can get any signs of life out of this thing. Let's try it. Oh my goodness. Some signs of life. It was almost a sign of death for my right knee. But I keep trying to flip this thing over. Here's some thoughts from future Paul as I was editing this episode. This is just kind of stuff that I didn't film, but I still want you to know. At this point in time, I should have known something was wrong. I usually don't have too much trouble kicking bikes over, despite the fact that I'm not very big. But this thing just would not budge. I could literally stand on the kicker, and I should have known there was some issue going on, but I'm stubborn, so I persisted. Actually sounded maybe promising on the electric starter. Let's try it again. I'm a little small bit concerned with how hard this thing is to kick over. It's just like really, really tight on one stroke. I don't know if this is just because it has really, really good compression, or I'm just a weenie. I'm a little guy, but I'm stouter than I look. I usually don't have too much of an issue kicking a bike over, but this thing is just like kicking a brick wall. So there may be something going on there, and I have had this thought that maybe that and the starter issue are conjoined, that the starter is struggling so hard to turn over because it's trying to turn an engine that doesn't want to turn. So what I'm going to do is get this thing inside where we're in the air conditioning and it's a little bit more comfortable, and we can do a little bit more work in there. It's easier to be productive when you're not just drenched in sweat, right? At least it rolls pretty easy. Good night. Okay. So now that this thing is inside and on a little bit more solid ground, and I'm a little more comfortable, I've pulled the spark plugs out. I just wanted to make sure that this thing would kick over easier with no compression. So let's see what happens. Much easier. That actually is probably a good thing. Just means we have really good compression on this engine. I guess it could mean we do have a lifter or a valve train issue, maybe. I don't know. So we know it'll kick over easily with the spark plugs out. Let's try it with the electric starter next. We'll hook the battery back to it. Basically, same test. If we remove the spark plugs and so let the compression come back out the spark plug holes, does the engine turn freely? Which it does. And will the starter then turn everything freely as well? Let's find out. Cool. So now that we've ascertained that, I'm going to go grab a compression tester and we'll do a quick compression test. All right, we got our gauge on there. We're going to do the back cylinder first, rear cylinder first. 50 or 55 PSI, and then it's like that starter just won't turn through it. So we got no gauge. This is empty spark plug holes again. Spins over like crazy. More future Paul thoughts. I did try and do a compression test using the kicker, and basically I had the same results. I could kick it over once, maybe twice, and make 65 or 70 PSI worth of compression in this thing, and then at that point in time, it was basically a brick wall, and I could literally stand on the Kickstarter again. So I fairly well just gave up on that. I also did a quick sanity check and just pulled the clutch in and kicked the bike through, and that just let me know that we weren't hanging up in the transmission or somewhere in the primary. It just goes through smooth as butter with the clutch pulled in, and then you let the clutch back out, and now all of a sudden it's a brick wall again, assuming the spark plugs are in it. So I'm going to take a minute and shut the doors. I've got the doors open right now so that we've actually got some decent light on this bike for the camera. And I'm going to soak up a little bit of AC and just do a little bit of thinking for a minute and decide where to go next. Okay, so the bike is sitting here on a work stand. I've got the pushrod tubes up and I put it in gear. We're in 4th gear and we turned it around. I did also take this little bore scope and go down the piston, not the piston holes. There's no holes in the piston. I went down the spark plug holes to look at the piston. And we've got really good cross hatching on the cylinders. The tops of the pistons look, you know, okay. We should be able to turn this into a running bike. Maybe we just have a tappet adjustment that's wrong. So let's work on that. All right, so we're gonna start with the front cylinder intake pushrod. I've got the bike in gear. We've rolled it over until now this pushrod is down all the way. And the book will tell you to just kind of do a sanity check here. When the pushrod you're trying to adjust is down all the way, your opposite pushrod for the same thing, intake or exhaust, should be up all the way. So the front cylinder intake pushrod is down, so that means that lifter, that tappet is all the way down on the base circle of the cam, and the rear cylinder intake pushrod is all the way up. Then we need to get some 7/16 wrenches. And whoever was in here before me, I'll throw some pictures up on the screen, they really did a number on these pushrod adjusters and lock nuts and such. This stuff was super tight, but for the top you need to hold the pushrod itself, and I've got a little wrench that I've ground down. Honestly, I could probably make this a little thinner, and I might do that later. And then I ended up having to use a line wrench to break the adjuster loose. So this is the actual lock nut on the adjuster. This is the pushrod. So pushrod, lock nut, actual adjuster. And then what we're gonna do is follow. So all you really need to do here is just run the adjuster to make it shorter, and this will put a bunch of slack in the push rod, and that's exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, I would call that noticeable shake. Man, I had to go forever on that thing. You can actually hear it knocking around. We need to hold this push rod from moving, and then take the adjuster and run it down, back into the engine case, towards the ground, towards the flywheel, until all of this up and down weeble wobble is gone. So you can kind of feel it when it touches, when it bottoms out the bottoms out the lifter. These are hydraulic lifters, by the way. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is mark the adjusting screw with chalk and turn it down exactly 4 full turns. So I've got a little yellow, this is actually wax, not chalk, but we will mark that flat right there, and I'm going to hold the push rod itself with our little ground down wrench, and I'm holding the flashlight in my mouth, so y'all just bear with me. Okay, so there's our yellow again, so I've been around 1 full turn, so I need to go 3 more. The other way you can do this is that these are 6-point nuts, and so you need to go 6 flats of a nut is 1 full revolution, and 6 times 4 is 24. So you could go 24 flats worth of nut if you don't want to paint this or mark it in any way, shape, or form. Anyways, I'm just going to time lapse me.
And then, like I said earlier in this video, the next thing we're going to do is lengthen this adjuster. Just keep lengthening it. 4 full revolutions of the adjuster nut, and this will make everything tight again.
So that is our 4 full turns down. We have lengthened the push rod out 4 full turns from that, you know, basically loose 0. Finally, we're gonna then hold the push rod in place and hold the adjuster in place, and then tighten the lock nut. There we go. You need to be an octopus nearly to do that. Next, we need to wait. As the old timers that I worked with for so long used to tell me, now's the time to smoke them if you got them. With these hydraulic lifters, it's really important that you let them bleed back down. This is different than doing a set of solids. Solids, in my opinion, are a little bit simpler, but require more frequent adjustments and oftentimes run a little bit louder, though the solids in my Shovelhead aren't really that bad. I don't mind the way that they sound, and I've had solid lifters in like race cars and stuff over the years with no real issues. So we're gonna let that sit.
Okay, so Kenneth is going to be our little helper for this, and I'll show y'all what all we've got, what our setup is going on here. We adjusted the valves, we adjusted the push rods on this thing, and it didn't make a difference. So I've got the bike back up in the air. We're all the way up in 4th gear. Kenneth has got his block of wood wedged there on the rear brake, and what are you going to do with it, Kenny? Pull, that's right. So he's going to pull on that block of wood, and it's going to lock that back brake down for us. And then walking around to the other side of the bike, we have a cylinder leak down tester right here going on. So we're going to put some air in these cylinders. We're hooked up on the front cylinder right now. I've got the clutch cover off down there on the bike. That's off, and the timing hole is open. I did this for 2 reasons. Let me turn the camera around and talk for just a second. I did this for 2 reasons. The first is that I wanted to make sure that this engine hadn't sumped from sitting a really long time. And it doesn't appear that it has actually. So when I took the clutch cover off, it didn't puke a whole lot of oil out, and the oil level's about even, or not even, it's kind of at the bottom of the clutch basket, like about where it should be. The other thing is that with the timing hole out, again, I was just checking for something to make sure that there wasn't a ton of oil in the actual crankcase itself. With looking in the primary, that would mean if there was a ton of oil in there that maybe the engine had sumped, and then we also had a failed main shaft sprocket seal, and that all that sumped oil had made its way into the primary. Okay, So we're gonna start putting some air to this thing. I kind of already know what's gonna happen because I fooled with this yesterday some. So you can see that at only 20 psi, we're leaking down around 5 psi. And if you get down here to the, I know this isn't focused, but if you get down here to the timing hole, that air's coming right out the bottom end of this thing. Alright, so I put the timing plug back in, and we're going to go a little more heavy-handed on the air. Were you holding the tire, Kenneth?
No.
No. Alright, Kenneth let off the tire there, so we're not at top dead center anymore on number 1. I actually just grabbed my phone for this, but you can see that we are just pushing all of the air right past the rings into the bottom end. And doesn't come through well on camera, but it's hissing out of the crankcase breather. It's trying to roll the engine over. You can hear it starting to come out of the pipes. But you can also hear it coming out of the oil tank too. So we've got some serious top end problems in this engine. Last future Paul thought. I didn't quite catch it on camera, but before that engine tried to roll a little bit, we were able to hold this thing at top dead center. And at that point in time, we were putting about 65 pounds of air on it, but only had about 40 pounds on the other gauge, which that's a very significant amount of leak down. And all of that leak down was going straight to the bottom end on this engine. It was coming out the crankcase breather, and you could also hear it coming out the oil tank, which is not good. So where do we go from here? Well, for the purposes of this episode, basically nowhere. The next place I would probably start on this bike is throwing a new set of lifters in it. They seem like they're kind of trying to open the valves. You can watch through the spark plug hole and at least see the intake valves open. But I do know that those hydraulic lifters, if they have trouble pumping up and they just stay bled down or whatever, they can do some crazy stuff like this as far as making the bike really, really, really hard to turn over. This still doesn't mean that that would fix the bike. It might get it running, but it might just have a bunch of blow-by. Those leak down numbers we saw earlier in this episode really are not good. The customer says that this bike has a freshly built engine, that it was built like around 10 years ago or so, maybe 12 years ago. And according to the son of the man who put this bike together, sounds like the father was constantly playing with the pushrod adjustment, so it's very possible that this thing has had a failed lifter for like a decade plus. Hey Kenny, you want to say hi? Kenny's out here too with me. Anyways, I've talked to my customer about this, kind of told him all of that, and at first he was like, man, I'm just going to part this bike out. And I was like, okay, I get it. You want to try and make some of your money back out of the package deal, what he spent on this bike and that 1970 FLH. Then there was some discussion about maybe him signing the title of it over to me and I taking it in exchange for some labor hours on some of his other motorcycles. And I told him I wanted to think about that for a few days, and I went back to him and said, yeah, man, I think I'm in. And he texted me back. He's like, actually, I ordered a set of lifters for it. I'm going to try and put lifters in it myself and just see what happens. So y'all may or may not see more of this motorcycle on this channel. We'll just kind of see what happens. I would love for him to throw a set of lifters in this bike and it runs, and maybe it does have a fresh engine build and those leak down numbers are just because the rings aren't seated yet in the cylinder walls. Maybe a couple $100 and a few hours of labor throwing some lifters in it gets this bike back on the road. But that won't be on this channel, at least not right now. Maybe in the future I'll have some more work to do to this bike if he decides to keep it. or if he decides to bring it back to me for some future work. So basically this was a whole episode of me just going through, diagnosing the Shovelhead that won't start, and doing a leak down test, and some other things that hopefully y'all find helpful working on your own bikes. So what do you think about that, Kenny? Kind of,
I have no clue what you're saying.
You have no clue what I'm saying. Sometimes I don't either. And on that note, we'll see y'all on the next episode. Bye.